Hi, good morning, everyone. It's 9:01. We'll commence the meeting. Welcome to the December 13th, 2023 meeting of the Bricktown Urban Design Committee. My name is Brent Wall, and I am the Vice Chair of the committee, and I'll be running the meeting today. When called on, applicants and speakers will come forward to the front podium to speak. Only one person at a time should come to the podium. Please speak into the microphone, identify yourself, and provide your address for the record when you begin speaking. Address your comments to the committee, and please limit your comments to 3 minutes. Citizens may address the committee on agenda items by responding to chair's call for speakers during discussion on each item and signing the speaker's log at the podium. All comments must be relevant to the item being heard. The chair or presiding officer may, in his or her discretion, prohibit a person from addressing the committee and/or remove that person from the council chambers if that person commits any disorderly or disruptive behavior. Please refer to the meeting agenda for more information about these requirements. If you parked in the Sheridan Walker parking garage north of John Ricks Elementary School or in the Arts District parking garage just south of City Hall, staff can provide you with a parking validation ticket. The agenda and documents are located at okc.primegov.com/public/portal. You would select the Bricktown Urban Design Committee meeting. Once there, you would then click on an agenda item and the related documents will come up below the item. Keith, will you please call the roll?
Concio.
Present.
Wall.
Present.
Egan.
Present.
Scaramucci.
Present.
Thompson.
Present.
We have quorum.
All right, thank you, sir. All right. Our first item today is approval of the November 8th, 2023 meeting. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Second? Please
I can
cast
second.
your-
Yep.
Thank you. Please cast your votes.
And I'll voice vote yay. I'm having trouble signing in to Prime.
The item is passed. And there we go. Thank you. Item number 3, cases withdrawn. There are none. Item number 4, continuance requests are none. Item number 5, consent docket. We have no items on that agenda item. Item number 6, cases for individual consideration. Item A, BCA-23-00007 at 108 East California Avenue. Michael, can you brief us on the application?
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. This item is an item the committee has seen before. It was on your docket at the October meeting on October 11th. As a result of a variety of concerns that were raised both by staff and by the committee members, the committee decided to continue the item to the meeting on this date for the applicant to address a number of the concerns that were raised at that meeting. The applicant has made revisions to the project, and I'm going to focus my comments to you today on basically a summary of what was done. That appears on page 3 and 4 of your staff report. First of all, you may remember maybe it was a day or two before the meeting on October 11th, we received a engineering report on the status of the existing structure. At the time, the project was a combination of either or. Either they were going to add on to that building or they were going to demolish it. And I think as a result of the report we received prior to the previous meeting, I think it became pretty clear that the building is unstable in a number of ways, and now the option for adding on to that building is off the table, and they're proposing a straight demolition and new construction from the ground up. So that's one of the changes. The issue of the trash collection for the building was raised at the last meeting, And at that meeting, the applicant had indicated they've been working cooperatively, and they've since reiterated that point with the owners of the property on the south side of the alley that is a parking lot across from the Kingman building. And there is an existing trash enclosure at that location, and they have said they plan to use that facility for their trash. However, we've not seen any documentation that they have any permission to do that. We have no idea how they're going to handle 8 stories or more of hotel with the same number of bins that are there, because they've not talked to us anything at all about expanding the area for the trash. And as a consequence, we're not convinced that the trash issue has been fully resolved. We also discussed at the last meeting on this case some issues with respect to trying to replicate some of the architectural features that are present on the existing building in the new construction of this building. And most pertinent to us as staff, based on the guidelines that are in the building conservation rehabilitation guidelines, are trying to replicate the pattern, size, symmetry, proportion of the windows that are appearing on the first 2 floors of the proposed building, which is the 2 floors that are on the existing building today. And in addition, a parapet wall line that is present on the north end of the building facing the canal. The applicant did make revisions to all these features. He made an attempt to give us some windows that are more reminiscent or replicate or emulate the window spacing and the proportions that are present on the north end of the building and the south end of the building. And they also made an attempt to give us a replica of the parapet wall profile that is present on the north end of the building. In our assessment of those attempts, we've advised the applicant that we think more work is necessary, and we don't think that they've hit the mark on trying to match or at least closely replicate those features of the building. We advised the applicant of this assessment, and they've chosen not to make any further revisions to the windows or the parapet. We had also initially expressed some concerns about the features that are extended over the north end of the building. They have a cantilevered pool that extends out to the north, as well as part of the roof that extends about 10 feet or 9 or 10 feet off the north end of the building. And this is over an area that is covered by an easement for the operation and maintenance of the Bricktown Canal. We encourage the applicant to work with Parks and Rec Department because they're the ones responsible for maintaining and operating the canal. And as the latest report we had from Parks and Recreation is that all their concerns with respect to the items that overhang the easement have been addressed or will be during the construction process. We also had concerns about a canopy, entry canopy structure that they're proposing to, the applicant's proposing to build at the south end of the building that would be completely over Wanda Jackson Way. In other words, it would span from the south side of the building to the south side of Wanda Jackson Way. It's built of exposed steel. We've worked with Public Works on this matter, trying to figure out what the process is to get it done. Basically, there's a revocable permit that's necessary. Public Works has advised us that they can't approve it at their level. It's something that would probably have to go before the City Council for final approval. It's not something we see on an everyday basis. It's something that would probably be easier to operate with if they had done a closure of this street. That's something they mentioned early on in the process, but it hasn't been pursued. So at this point, we're dealing with a public right-of-way with a proposed structure being built over it. There are stainless steel tiles involved in the exterior building materials of this project. They have proposed to limit the application of that material to the upper two floors, 7th and 8th floor of the building. The code does allow for the use and incorporation of contemporary building materials. However, staff has determined, and basically the code says you're supposed to use it in a limited basis, and we feel that 2 floors worth of it is more than the code would really want to see used, and we're proposing, or we're recommending that that material be limited to only the 8th floor, not the 7th and 8th floor. In addition to that, the material comes in a shiny surface or a matte finish, and we feel that the matte finish would be more appropriate in terms of compatibility with the matte finish of the brick that's used on most of the building. And we recommended to the committee that that should change to the matte finish material. They have changed, you may remember, the roof structure at the last meeting extended out over the building walls on all 4 sides, north, south, east, and west. One change that's obvious in this set of plans is they've removed those overhangs on both the east and the west sides, but the overhangs do remain at the north and the south, and they're pretty extensive, about 9 or 10 feet on the north and I think 16 feet on the south. There was some discussion at the last meeting about there's a proposed connection at the 4th floor of the proposed building to the 4th floor of the Kingman building, as there's discussions between the property owner next door and the applicant to utilize the 4th floor of the Kingman building as an event center that would be connected to the 4th floor of this hotel. Some of the committee members at the meeting expressed some interest in seeing what the floor plan of that building would look like, and that is a sheet that is in your plan set. It is not part of the approval because it's not part of this address and can't be, it's there really just for illustrative purposes for your edification. That's pretty much in summary all that's been changed over the course of the almost 2 months since we met last on this project. The rest of the report goes into detail quite a bit on the demolition of the building, because there's a whole section about demolition, and we've identified through our assessment of their report that it's probably not a bad idea to go ahead and demolish the building because it's pretty unstable. However, there are a number of issues with respect to the trash, the architectural detailing of the first 2 floors of the building, and the treatment of the materials on the outside, the use of the stainless steel materials and so on and so forth that we have described in detail in the balance of the report, that we're recommending that they have not, we don't believe in staff's opinion that they've met the intent of the guidelines or the regulations for the Bricktown review, and we have therefore once again recommended continuance for this item for them to do some further work to hopefully get this building more in keeping with the applicable development regulations and guidelines. That concludes our presentation. We're prepared to respond to any questions the commission or committee may have.
Any questions from commission members? For Michael?
Michael, can you refresh my memory on how does the Kingman and this building, how does that work? Does Kingman certainly have to agree to this? And then are they part of the supervision of how this all comes together, or how does this work?
We don't know.
I think, well, if they were to construct a connection between this building and the other building, there would have to be some sort of legal agreement between the 2 buildings. And similarly, there's discussion about coordinating with Kingman on their site for the use of the dumpsters. So that would also presumably need to be some sort of formal arrangement and agreement with the Kingman building. Now, if they were to just build this building and not attach to the Kingman, then they don't need any sort of
Correct.
authorization for that. And I'll note too, I think that the attachment to the Kingman building is not going to be something that's visible. It would have to be reflected on a building permit, of course. I think that's something that, if the project were approved without the connection, could be a pretty simple revision once those details were arranged, if both parties agreed to that.
So do you feel that the first step would be if and when this building is approved, and then the second step would be if the Kingman connection would also be approved by the owners of the Kingman building as well as the city approving that joint? Would
Yes,
it be
so-
staged?
Well, so honestly, I think the Kingman building would have to get their own certificate of approval because they're going to be altering the exterior of their building in order
Okay.
to connect to the exterior of this building. I think that could be done separately from an approval that doesn't include the connection, and then you would come back with their CA and with a revision to this CA
Okay.
if this were approved.
Okay, thank you.
A lot of moving parts.
Okay, if we have no further questions for Michael, we'll go ahead and move on. If you all would allow, before we speak to the applicant, in review of the November 8th meeting, I feel like most of the commissioners here weighed in on this item. Given that we still have a slew of continuance items, staff does not feel like they can recommend an approval at this time. I did want to open it up to the committee, the commission, for any members who weren't here on the 8th to maybe provide some feedback before we head into that.
It was the October 11th
I'm
meeting.
sorry,
by the
October
way.
11th, I'm sorry, yes. Commissioner McCown, do you have any comments? If you don't, it's fine. I just thought I would give an opportunity to maybe weigh in on this.
Probably I have a little bit of experience in encroaching over alleyways. We built some balconies at the Bower at 4th between Dewey and Lee, and we cantilevered those balconies out over the alley. I believe we were 20 feet above the alley. 14 feet seems like enough clear height to get service vehicles through there in terms of trash collection.
Right.
It might not be a bad idea if they could make it just a little bit taller. And it looks like there's room without impeding the windows. But I really think that's probably something we can, leave up to Public Works. There's a lot of delivery coming down that alley, and it's a tricky, it's tricky to navigate if you've got a beer delivery truck headed west and then a trash truck headed east. I mean, it's very tight space. But it is 20 feet, and that's more than enough room if everybody squeezes over where they need to be. So it can probably be worked out. The other one that came to mind is, is there any kind of an easement relative to the miniature golf course? Because we've got an entire wall built on the property line, if I'm reading this correctly, and it's full of windows. So there's got to be some kind of assumption that a minimum of 10 feet would be agreed to for, some future building on the miniature golf course site that wouldn't basically be built hard up against these windows. I don't know if that's been thought about or addressed, but
That hasn't come up yet, but it's
Okay.
probably something that needs to be
I mean,
addressed, yeah.
it's always a tricky thing with, urban buildings. We've certainly looked at other sites, like the Spaghetti Warehouse building, for example. It only has windows on 3 sides, and to be able to make the building function, you know, you'd need to cut a bunch of windows into its east facade, and which would require, you know, somehow getting the development rights purchased for the building to the east so that they wouldn't, you know, some subsequent development wouldn't delete those windows. And
Would they not, on the miniature golf course, be able to abut the building on the east, just like the Kingman building is going to abut the west side?
if the miniature golf, if a future building were to abut that and build straight up,
Right.
I don't know that this building functions.
Right.
You know, I mean, from
Right.
a fire code standpoint,
Right.
or, I mean, it just begins to be something that I don't know that it's just within, you know, our scope of things we should be worrying about, but I just feel like an obligation to bring that up to the developer, that, you know,
Absolutely.
you might want to secure those development rights for, I believe with this volume of windows, it would be a minimum of 10-foot separation.
Yep. Well, that's something we're going to have the applicant address if the project goes forward.
So,
Thank you. I was not at the October 11th meeting either. It sounds like there is absolutely a desire to have something really great in this location. I think, you know, that is you know, been established. Demolition of the existing structure seems to be, you know, universally understood and accepted that needs to happen. You know, I think our job is always tough because we can't really control the design. I think we can say, you know, I think what we're seeing is at least the renderings are more graphic and understandable than what we've seen before, so I definitely appreciate that. But I deeply respect staff's opinion, and given that we don't have a full-throated recommendation to move forward, there still are items that need to be worked through. New items are coming up. It just seems like the project is not fully baked at this point, and I question how much we need to really debate or you know, talk about this project too much more today, and just an effort to kind of keep the project moving and to save our time. I would kind of like to move forward and continue. So
I think it would be, the applicants here, they're prepared to present. I'm sure they would like to get some substantive feedback on the design. I think there's kind of two separate categories of issues that have been raised by staff. One is the design of the building and whether or not this meets the mark on being compatible with the Bricktown district. I think that's for this committee to discuss and, if not approve, at least provide direction on what further changes the committee feels need to be made from a design perspective. I think the other category of issues relate to more of the building permitting, easements, alleys, you know, revocable permits, that sort of thing. And to what extent we move forward with those questions unanswered, and conditions that, as necessary, they come back to get recommendations for anything that needs to go before another body, versus saying, no, we really do need to have more of these items pinned down and fully defined, and it needs to come back again.
Well, I agree. I mean, we can have the applicant come up, but at some point, you know, this commission gives recommendations, staff gives recommendations. If it kind of keeps coming back and minor changes, then, you know, we're just kind of spinning our wheels. So I'm happy to have the applicant come up and walk us through that. I would appreciate if it was brief, though.
Thank you. My name is Jose Rodriguez. I'm one of the developers for this project in 108 East California Avenue. Last time we were here, we took on about 10, 11 items of concerns from the committee members. We jot down, and we made it a point to address those and make the necessary adjustments to the design and the approach that we had. Michael did mention some of those, probably all of them, because I was the one that sent them the list. But I'll just recap real quick, and so we can kind of move on, like you said. The first one was, committee member asked about the brick, the original brick color, the dark brick on the first 3 levels, or the only 3 levels at this point. We went ahead and modified that in our design. And you can see on the canal side, you have the 3 levels with the darker red brick going up all the way to what we show is the coping that was, discussed, the zigzag. We took that original concept of the coping and we went all around the building to continue that. So that was the coping and also the darker brick. Then we also express the lighter brick, which is kind of represented, you see it everywhere in the adjacent buildings or across the canal. It's the lighter brick that we have in the midsection of our building. Another item was the windows in the north facade, which are the slim windows. We actually took the exact dimension of those windows, width, height, and also the sill, which is the stone, and we're using cast stone. And we continued those windows from the north facade, wrapped it around to the east, and then to the south as well, on the upper levels. On the south facade, I believe it was Mr. Thompson that mentioned the warehouse windows. So what we did is we took the windows there, the exact same dimension of those big windows, and we put them in the first 2 levels on the south side. Now, the reason we have some of those a little bit slimmer is because we have tubs where you see those windows. Obviously, there's no need for a window to be, 7 by 9 feet tall or something like that, or wide in those areas. Another item that was also brought up by one of the committee members was the louvers that we had above and below the windows around the building. We eliminated those where they're not functional, and we only left them on the east facade where it's, where the units are, the air conditioning units. So that's another change. The horizontal bands that you see, they're metallic. It's actually that finish that you see right there. And that's the size of the tile. We eliminated a lot of those horizontal bands and just, have a minimum where you have a change in material colors or material finish. Another Egan, I think, was the member that mentioned a question about once we demo the building, the existing building, do we leave a gap in between the Kingman building and our building? We met with building plan review with Sonny, and he's basically recommended that we can go all the way up to the Kingman building and build like our current condition is. Someone in the committee also asked what was the layout for the Kingman building that we're going to be doing. So we provided that also. It's in your floor plans in the set that we provided. So you can see the 3-hour separation with the double doors and also the fire separation that would be in that floor plan. Now, as far as the question that you had, Scaramucci member, I believe, asked a question on what is the protocol as far as, submitting for building permit for the remodel in the Kingman. What we have been told is that by the city plan review department is that we can actually submit as a bulk for the hotel and also for the remodel in the Kingman building, or we can do it separate, whichever the case needs to be. But they did say that we could also do it all together if we wanted to do that. So those are the items. As far as the Michael mentioned about so you can see in the renderings, the brick goes all the way from the canal, all the way 3 levels, and then the 3 midsection levels. The 2 levels at the very top is actually a floor and a half. And you can see on the renderings, it's not a full floor on the very top, 8th floor. There's the pool area, the bar area, the fitness area, the lounging area, so it's really not a full level. So as far as the metal panel, that's the one that you're gonna see over here on the far right, my right. And then in the midsection right here, you see the roof panels, the combination that will be for the roof overhang. The 2 bricks are right there in front of you as well, the darker and the lighter, and that's kind of what we have so far. So we do feel, I know what Michael has presented to you, but we do feel that we answered and we actually addressed every single comment that was asked of us in the last meeting by committee members, and we made the modifications and the changes that we were suggested, So we feel that we have fulfilled, and we would like to your consideration to move forward with this project. You have to understand a lot of this and a lot of those items that have to be ironed still, we have to hire the architects and the engineers to actually move forward. A lot of the details and specs and all these construction things that have been asked, from us, we can't really move forward until we're actually in the queue, in the process, and going through all these different approvals with all the other different departments. Now, I've met with every single Parks and Recreation, Public Works, Building, department. All of these departments have told us personally that they're with us, they want to help us, they want to help us move forward this project. We just got to get in there and start working on it. So, thank you.
Any comments from commissioners?
I hear you and I really appreciate, I do see from the previous application the changes that you made, and for me, I appreciate the direction they've gone to get closer to complementing the existing Bricktown area. I think what we really want to have happen too is make sure that your building is as boutique of a building and its use is streamlined and enjoyable to the people using it and the community that it's servicing and around. So I think that's where some of these questions are coming from on the use of it. So I'll get to my actual question here, or concern, that I'm sorry I didn't notice last time, but you're using an ADA lift at the south side of the building, and I understand its existing conditions. You got to get your people up to that first floor. But we just went through a big rigmarole in the last couple of years where those ADA lifts are actually really hard to maintain, and they end up going out of service, and they've had to come up with other issues, which have then become, quite frankly, not the most aesthetically pleasing ADA ramps that have just been slapped on. I think that would be hard for you to do, being that this would be you need a revocable permit anyway for coming, because all of this butts up right to Wanda Way, right? So it'd be really hard to put any type of ADA ramp on there. And I don't have any other proposed solution, just a concern that something for ADA access long-term is really difficult to maintain.
Well, the department that deals with that then, give us a red flag on needing a revocable permit for the lifts that we have so far in the floor plans. But definitely, if it's something that we need to address, we're more than willing and open to do that as well. Like you said, we want the people to enjoy the boutique hotel, and it's in our best interest to address any item that will only benefit, the people that are going to be staying there in the hotel.
I'm curious about your thought about Richard's comment on the windows to the east. What is your thought on that? Because that would completely shift your floor plan and your design.
Yes. what we had discussed initially before we even did the floor plans is there's some units, some suites on the west facade, which butts up with Kingman building, that our scenario was, our backup plan basically, I mean, initially we're actually trying to negotiate and purchasing the property for the mini golf. So our idea was if someone, worst case scenario, somebody comes and builds there and does that, what we're doing, which is some of the hotels are doing in California and Miami and European countries, they have what we have actually already incorporated in our design, what we call interactive digital screen walls. So basically you go into the suite, and at the backdrop of the wall is this interactive screen which shows different views of like a beach or a jungle, rainforest, things like that, that you can actually change. And you can sleep with the background as well. So those walls, if it happens that in 5, 10 years from now, the owner doesn't have that, we will convert those end walls into interactive digital art media screens, walls, which is kind of a concept that we're developing within the hotel lobby as well. As soon as you enter the spa as well, you have different walls as you're walking through corridors or in different spaces, and you see these collages and almost like cultural murals on the walls that are interactive. So that's kind of our plan.
And forgive me here, I was trying to find the site plan here, but do you have a side yard setback on that side of the building? I couldn't tell.
No, it's the property line is the building line.
Okay, so I think one of the things that was brought up was a concern of like if you are building up right up to the property line, then another building comes, like it can I was trying to find the word, constrain the people to your east on what they can do, because they wouldn't be able to build right up against that building, or they would be constrained. They wouldn't have the same opportunity to build up to the full potential of their lot because of.
What we discussed with Chris, the owner of the Brickopolis and the mini golf, is the potential to come in to an agreement with an easement type, right next to our building. That's still, being discussed. But I know just by visiting with building plan review that I believe they have the right, as we do, to build all the way to their property line. So if that's the case, that's their prerogative. But we have, like I mentioned, a plan of our own, what to do interior-wise if that happens.
Is there any constraints with fire code for building, for windows?
I believe you need a 3-hour separation wall, firewall.
And you're planning on building that on that side?
On that one, yes. For instance, it's new construction on our end, we will have a 3-hour firewall. And it's a 3-hour double metal doors as well for the, that transition space from our hotel to the Kingman building as well.
And what essentially that would mean is if Chris were to get killed in a car wreck today, his widow sells the land, a big building gets built hard up against your building,
right?
You have to brick in all your windows, essentially.
Yes.
I mean, and probably would mean that your hotel would be slightly less successful if you had a whole bunch of hotel rooms with no windows.
Well, you'd be surprised because in LA, they have these macro units, hotels, which we worked on before. And they have these, I don't know if you've seen some of the more modern movies. You go into the hotel and they don't have windows. New York is a great example of that. I was just there in March.
Okay.
And there's no windows. Buildings are butt up to each other. And so what we are creating, it's a different environment where they can change that environment feel by having these different settings on the walls.
I have a feeling you'll be successful getting the easement from Chris. And what you might consider, and I was looking at this rendering from here, you know, it was kind of cut off. And at first when I looked at it, I thought you were building a sidewalk that connected down the east side of your building. So let me finish this thought. If you were to do that, if you struck a deal with Chris for a 10-foot wide easement, and then you went ahead and built that sidewalk as a pedestrian connection from Wanda Jackson over to the elevated walkway, you could, looking at your floor plan, ramp up slightly to basically the window across from your lobby, maybe the third or the fourth one, and then you could have an ADA entrance. You could maybe kill a couple birds with one stone there as you're working through this level of detail. I really want to see this project happen, and I want to see it be incredibly successful. I got to go visit an amazing city back in October and walk down lots of really narrow streets in Venice, Italy. And, you know, or I don't know that you'd call them streets, you know?
I wish it was a Venice, but we 100% agree with you. We're still in conversations with Chris. Chris knows that we want that easement.
Yeah.
Because it just creates so many different things for us as well.
Yeah.
Not only it allows for the flexibility of both owners of what can happen, you know, not limit and butt into each other, but it also creates pedestrian things to happen.
Absolutely.
And so we're still pushing. Maybe you can help us and call him. But we definitely want that to happen.
Okay.
And it also will help us in the demolition and construction aspect as well, to have that set back for construction purposes.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Well, it also helps to address your air conditioning units.
Right. Yeah.
I don't know what you'd do if you had a building up against your east side and you'd have air conditioning all working up.
Yeah.
So, I mean, day one, since we started working on this, we contact Chris and we've been sitting with him all this time. So
That's a great guy.
hopefully it'll come.
He wants to see, he wants to see good things happen in Bricktown. This looks like it's going to be a cool project. I want to see you get there with it. That leads to the other side of your property. Are you pretty deep along in your negotiations with the Kingman Building as it relates to both this rooftop thing? Is it a rooftop thing or is it their top floor?
It's, so we transitioned from our hotel on the 4th floor to their 4th level.
Okay.
And so it's 11,000 square feet of leasing space. I believe we already have a LOI with them. Yeah, we've been working on it. But,
Okay.
I mean, they already agreed, and so
Okay.
it's in the works right now. They actually emailed last week as far as when, they were asking us when our construction remodel, you know, schedule is for their space.
Okay. But you're not adding another floor to
No,
their
no.
building, you're just punching through? Okay,
Yeah, it's just a, you know, a 7-foot wide
yeah,
opening.
nice.
Yeah.
Okay. Good. I want to swim in this pool.
Are you done, Richard? You good?
Yeah, it's all.
Okay, I had a couple of questions based on the discussion that I think are probably more for city staff. I mean, we brought up this thing, which I didn't think about last time, so I'm happy Richard mentioned it, but this, so on the west facade, you're not in, there aren't any windows sort of proposed, even at the areas that are above Kingman. So on the east facade, we have windows, and if I'm understanding correctly, I mean, also the exhaust essentially for the units, for the air conditioner or conditioned space units. So without an easement, which is not, I mean, to what extent from a design review, I mean, this seems more like a building permit planning sort of issue, potential, I mean, and I don't want to speak for Chris at all, but like, let me just say a budding landowner challenge, right? For this, like if we were to approve the design, I still don't think this can be built without either an easement or a concession from the next property owner. because they would essentially, I mean, they could foreclose, right, on this building if it prevented them from being able to build next to it from fire code. That seems like something maybe not in our purview, but I just think about like the logistics of, again, let's say it's not Chris or somebody, but let's just say a property owner absolutely intends to build a tower and wants to go property line to property line. And there are mechanical units actually approved and put into the outside of the building, in addition to windows. Who pays for that to get bricked and fixed, right? Because it seems like an infringement on the next person, on that property owner. So I'm curious about that. Maybe don't need to talk about it here, but I just don't know if it should influence my perception of what design we would approve, right?
To that extent, I think that I think anybody looking at a piece of property to consider purchasing, I mean, there's lots of examples of having to work out things that have already been done in the area. Maybe not just butting up to, but there's always issues. I kind of agree that if this building is viable to be approved, first of all, if there would be a problem, I think it would not be in our purview. I think maybe Chris would come forward to the city or to someone and say this creates a value issue with my property at time which I develop or sell. So I just don't know that we can look that far in the future and decide.
And I guess, and that's why I said I want to kind of drop the names, because I think like it's not about the personality of the person, but it's just about the practical example of the city does oversee the building requirements, and so essentially be approving something that would preclude by code the building owner next to them from being able to build. Like, I mean, it would, like, you could, until it's bricked, you couldn't get a CO to build a tower next to this building. You see what I'm saying? And so just feels like, so yeah, we might be ahead of ourselves. So I guess I'm just curious from you guys' standpoint, if that's something for us to even take into consideration in regards to the design. It complicates my thought process, but if it doesn't matter what any of the sides look like, except purely from a design standpoint, then, you know, we kind of just ignore the fact that we're approving something that essentially negates the ability to build a building next to it based on code.
I think maybe Chris would be, I mean, he will know this is ongoing.
Yeah, but I guess, and all I'm saying, Avis, is, like, to that extent, it doesn't matter if he does or not. I mean, the action is that putting this mechanical service in non-appropriately fire-rated windows, right? Approving that design
Would we,
has the effect of nothing can get built next to this, abutting up to it, until that is fixed, right? Based on existing code. That's what I'm saying.
Cindina, would it be, I would feel more comfortable if we approved this building, given the current condition is that we don't know if you get that easement with that side bricked. And if you do get the easement, then you can bring back the windows. But at least we know that if you don't have the easement, it will not put the property owner to the east in any constraint because of your building.
I think you just hit it on the nail, because our lack of giving you more answers is because we're at a point where we can't move forward. We can't hire the architect, we can't hire the structural engineer, the MEP engineer, the civil engineers, or negotiate other issues with other tenants, landlords, because we don't have the approval from you guys.
Right, well, I understand, I'm in the design world, so I understand that.
Our understanding was that the Bricktown review was to be really, yes, we understand that there's parts that in motion and it has to do with traffic and circulation, trash enclosures, and all those things. But to us, we can't keep going every 2 months and we're going to bring you the same results because we can move forward.
Right, I think, sorry, Cindy, don't say, I think there's a couple of things. Just the, what would the building look like with that area completely bricked?
Right.
The design, in your design, I think that I do like the recommendation from the staff to limit the stainless steel to the 8th floor, and then make that into a matte finish. And then as far as the canopy is concerned on the alley, I think that can be resolved. But I know, I don't remember, there was at one point some talk about closing that alleyway or something. I don't like that idea. I don't think we should close that alleyway. But I think that, I think when you get to that point of, for the canopy, that can be resolved
Sure.
during the design phase
Sure.
for that. But I understand not having to come back and forth, but if we approve, what we approve today is we're approving a design that we visually think it works with the character of the Bricktown area. So I think I would like to see what this building is going to look like given where we are today with no easement to the east. So I don't know, is there a possibility to be able to request that in between? Or I'm not sure what the procedure for that would be.
I
for us
think Katie
to
had
see.
something she wanted to say.
If the committee if there's enough support on the committee to entertain the idea of approving this project, there are a whole host of items that have been outlined in the staff report that have not yet been addressed. The way to address that, and let's just take the easement on the east side as an example, would be if you're going to approve it, then you would need to have a whole bunch of conditions of approval to cover all the issues that are unresolved. And for example, on the easement on the east side, that would be probably your condition number one. We approve this provided that the applicant can obtain the necessary easement on the east side of the property to effectively allow this design. That would be condition number one. Then you would have a condition about how the canopy gets approved through whatever process it gets approved through. Then you would give some direction in your approval as to whether or not you're fine with 2 levels of the stainless steel material and whether it needs to be shiny or matte. And some direction in your approval about whether or not the windows that they proposed on the south end of the building are good enough for you, or they need to be fine-tuned even further, either coming back to you for that or doing it through staff. A couple different ways you can go on that. But the bottom line is there is a checklist of things, there's a roadmap in this staff report that covers all the issues that need to be addressed in this project. And if you're inclined to approve it, you're going to need to make sure that everything on the checklist is somehow been addressed one way or another in your approval. And that's typically going to be through a list of conditions of approval.
One item that's not on that list, but that was just raised, was the ADA access. With this now being new construction from the ground up and not an addition on top of an existing building, that may free the applicant up to find some other creative ways to address that and not have an ADA lift next to the stair. And that's certainly something that they could work through and then come back as a revision. As Michael said, we can include conditions that, and any additional permissions that they need are going to be triggered along the way through getting a building permit, getting revocable permits. Some of those items would need to come back to us for a recommendation. I do think with the discussion about the windows on the side, I think Brickopolis and the miniature golf is a successful, I don't think anyone anticipates that going away in the near future. I think it would be an important thing for this committee to consider how they would feel about that being continuing to be a blank wall on a newly built building versus a wall. I think we want windows there. That's certainly more attractive than a 8-story blank masonry wall. So I think that would need to be a carefully constructed condition to say that the applicant verify that they can construct it as proposed and that that's not going to infringe upon the abutting property owner. Or if they're not going to be able to proceed in that way, then obviously that needs to come back as a revision to the committee. And I'm sorry that I don't have an answer for you on, I think we've kind of looked at this almost as a corner building, even though it's not actually a corner. Right. I'm not sure what happens when they go to get a building permit and they look at that, the design on the property line side.
If I can add something real quick, I mean, you mentioned the whole future of the mini golf operation there. When we were in conversations with Chris as far as purchasing the mini golf, our view was that we wanted to not get rid of it, actually upgrade that, because that's such a benefit to the hotel as well. Families, people, groups coming in there to play. So that's just a plus for our operation as well. So I don't know what the future holds for that property, but I agree with her and that it's probably going to be there for a while, and it only helps our project.
Yeah, so I had a couple of things I just wanted to clarify. So, and I appreciate you for the answer, because that is, it's a little bit more than this proposal. It's just, I want to understand that piece in general, because I don't know that we've really contemplated. Like, we've had some good developments come, but they actually haven't brought these questions up, because it's not a corner lot. A corner lot would actually abut public easement, like on all sides. And so for me, it's a property rights question, not a Chris question, and not a what is the best use today. It's just truly a property. And I say that as a property owner, I say that as a developer, which will also inform my next set of questions. So that's just something maybe to take off the table for this, if that's the best sort of answer we have, but maybe just to think about more broadly is I'm just curious about what the implications are, because approval of this design does infringe on the property rights. I mean, I just read about a company that wants to build a headquarters in New York having to buy air rights for, I think it's St. Paul's Cathedral or something. They're not doing that because they're gonna knock down this 200-year-old cathedral, but they're doing it because that's the only way they can build over it, is they have to buy the rights, right? And so this approval, in effect, is infringing on the property rights of an owner because of the codes that the municipality is enforcing.
I'm really sorry to interrupt, because I know you got more, but I'm really curious about the answer as well. I have a feeling if you turned this in for a building permit today, you wouldn't get a building permit. I think as they go through the building plan review, they're going to say, you got to move your building back. If you want to maintain all these windows, you've either got to put them all in as like fire rated glass and move them back in order to ensure air circulation to all these, wall PTAC, heating and cooling pieces of equipment. And I'm looking at the plans like, there's probably 3 feet to be squeezed out of this. And what that might do, let's say he pulls it back 3 feet to get through a building permit process, then that might actually trigger the next building also having to be 3 feet back in order to create the fire separation. 6 feet won't do it. You're way over 25% glazing, so there is probably a larger question here, and I don't think it's our problem to solve. I think it's between you and your architect working through the details and getting to a building permit. And I believe, I think all these questions and concerns are brought to you with concern and love. Like, we want to see you have this beautiful building succeed.
And I agree with both of you. And I think there's the opportunity there, because we met with building plan review 2 or 3 times already. They've seen the building, they've seen the floor plans, they know the criteria and what we have adjacent to us. They haven't said anything about it, but I agree, once it goes into building permit and it's looked in detail. But I guess with all these questions as far as what if this happens and the builder, the next owner comes in, Chris sells or whatever, or Chris decides to build something?
Yeah.
What is not to say that that owner acknowledges our building facade and says, hey, they have something going on here, and it's to my own benefit
Yeah.
if I actually have a setback and an easement and create that pedestrian,
Yeah.
plaza, and it actually helps both of those properties.
I think that's the solution. And I think you will eventually arrive at that solution with the, and again, I really don't know the building codes well enough to know if 10-foot does the job. My guess is that it totally would. It looks like there's room without disturbing the mini golf existing layout to get 10 feet in there. I'd just love to see you get all that worked out. What I can probably offer is that, meeting with building staff, if you don't raise the question, you're not going to get the answer. It's going to wait until they get the review and they go, oh yeah, we got to send it over to fire. And then that's where you get punched in the nose and you're, thousands upon thousands of dollars deep into your architectural plans. And, they're going, well, those fire-rated windows, they're 5 times more expensive than the normal glass you have. So
I totally agree.
Those can really impact your overall.
Yeah, and it's not
experience.
tens, it's hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Well, they've got a lot of windows.
But I
yes.
agree with you. I think what we're asking is that you help us pass today, so we can actually engage all those building departments and go through all the approvals, and they can tell us what needs to happen. Because I can tell you right now, if for some reason Chris or the next owner of that area decides to build next to us, we don't have that scenario. We don't have that mechanical system scenario. Is going to be more of a different, type of mechanical system that we're going to have, not those units on the walls anymore, because we don't have ventilation.
Yeah.
So all those things come into play, but we don't know what's going to happen until we start engaging all these different departments.
I hear you.
We have more comments from commissioners.
Sorry, I actually want to wrap up my comments, so I just want to make sure I've got got the feedback. So it's two hopefully very related things. One is this is my perspective and recollection of experience. So again, for staff, if you correct me if I'm misrecollecting, but I understand, and I say this as somebody involved in the development space and am very involved in Bricktown for years. There is nothing that precludes you moving forward with figuring out the deal. I absolutely understand why you wouldn't want to propose. I mean, why you wouldn't want to necessarily engage a architect and MEP and all those kind of things. I get the sequence. But what I'm used to seeing in these proposals, when we're looking at design, and it actually helps to understand the context of the design, is that the deal is done. And so from my standpoint, like thinking about approval, I'm with Richard. I really want to see this project. I think boutique hotel on the canal would be great for activity. I think I want to swim in the swimming pool as well, or maybe not swim, but watch other people do it. So I can only sort of give approval or speak to the design for the parts of the deal that are done. And I think what's being proposed here is more than sort of the deal. So there is no easement. So for me, in my mind, and that's why I asked kind of the other question, I can't assume that there will be because other projects where we've had complex sort of property dynamics, they've come and said, we've got this in place with this person, this in place with this person, and this is what our assumptions are based on. So I'm just saying that from my own personal sort of perspective. And then so I think to approval, the other question that I have for staff is, what do the next, so if there's conditional approval, what do next steps look like from the standpoint of, I assume we have to approve the demolition request? So what are the steps if we have a conditional approval that don't mean that we end up with a building that's been demolished for a building that can never be built? Is there, Are those processes connected or are they completely separate?
So ultimately, once we approve a demolition, we have no mechanism to require an applicant to build anything back, even if there were no question marks in place. They could have a fully baked, I have paid cash for everything, ready to go tomorrow project, and get approval for demolition and do the demolition and walk away. And we don't have we don't have a tool to then turn around and make them build back what they said they were going to build back in association with the demolition. That's why we have to look at a demolition very thoughtfully. I know all of our design committees prefer to see, at least, theoretically, what's going to go back in the place of the demolition. We would prefer to know that it's going to be a great new project and not a vacant lot. But ultimately, we don't have a way to guarantee or require that. So if this was approved, if the demolition was approved and then the new building was built with conditions, was approved with conditions, then the demo could go forward as approved, regardless of what any of those conditions are or whether they're met. Then as they go through with the conditions, some of those might need to come back to this body for a recommendation. Some of those conditions might trigger a revision to the design that would either come back to staff or come back before the committee. And they would just work their way down through the process.
If I can say this real quick, to your question, it's not to our benefit as developers on this particular site to spend any money on demolition. The reason for that is we will not demo this structure, existing structure, until we have gone through every single approval for every single building department across the board. Because if we start demolition, I know you can do demolition early and still kind of go through some of the building process approvals. Is not in our own benefit because we don't want to spend the money and then later on, 2 months later, we get the building permit rejected, or city council doesn't approve this, or you guys, even if it's an approval that with, some items that we have to fulfill down the road, it is not to our benefit to spend money, $1 on demoing this existing structure until we have all gone through all the different approvals, revocable permits, city council, public works, all of the different departments.
Demolition permits have a limited window of time, and I can't remember what that.
6 months.
6 months. So, when we approve this, we effectively are also approving the demolition of the existing structure, correct?
That is one item that is on your agenda today. You could theoretically, if the commission felt this way, or the committee felt this way, they could approve the demolition and continue everything else.
Okay.
Or you could approve everything all at once.
Well, what we wouldn't want to do is approve the demolition, start the 6-month clock, and then he's got to demolish it before he gets all through.
They can come back for an extension.
That's true.
Okay.
Can we do the opposite? Can we approve the design and not approve the demolition?
Well,
The design doesn't work without the demolition.
We're good with that.
I'm just trying. I guess I'm just trying to understand procedure.
The design of the project does not work without.
Oh, I don't disagree.
Okay.
But it's just that would suggest that the demolition would come up down the road, not be the first thing. And in practice, again, not necessarily specific to this project, I think that would be a lot more interesting for a historic preservation district to think about demolition being approved after designs are baked versus before.
That's the way it works in Italy. I don't know,
Are you suggesting that the demolition permit could be issued upon receiving a building permit? I mean, is that even a possible mechanism?
They are required to get a certificate of approval of the demolition first,
Okay.
before they can get a demolition permit. It's a two-stage process, just like the building.
So the
So you have to get a CA first to build a building, and then you go get your building permit. Same applies to demolition. You have to get a demolition for the, you have to get a CA for the demolition of the building, then you go get a demolition permit.
So how could we do this if it, where we say you can't get the demolition permit until you're issued a building permit for this structure? Is that possible?
I think there's been some conversations about that in the past when we've had some high-profile demolitions, and I think we have not put that into practice, but I can't say that it has not been something that we've done in the past.
never dealt with
Now,
that.
I think from the standpoint of giving them the assurance that ultimately the project will be allowed to go forward and they can go ahead and start hiring all the professions and trades that they need to hire, and they can start a more thorough review from permitting. I can see where saying we're going to approve the project but not approve the demolition. But that is not something that we have done in the past. We've approved either a demolition on its own or a demolition with new construction hand in hand.
And I guess I'm asking, I'm trying to dissociate from this specific thing because just a little bit, but then also ask the question, so as a matter of practice and as a matter of process, can we approve the design so that these elements can be worked out? And I want to be on record as saying, I have hired design firms to figure out projects. This is an inherently risky business, and nothing is guaranteed. I don't feel like our obligation is not to guarantee that this happens. I actually want to see it happen. The thing that helps me get there is for all these unknowns to be resolved. But if the opportunity to wrap that up is that then we're considering the demolition permit based on answering some of the questions that apparently are being held up plan review will only go so far, et cetera, et cetera. That seems to be a great way to think about a preservationist approach in a historic preservation district to exploring these kind of innovative designs.
So I'm really nervous about what I'm about to say because I'm going to be standing right where you are next Thursday, seeking a demolition permit and in front of a different design review body. So I really don't want to set a precedent here that I've got to try and live with. So what I think you're saying is we approve this design to move forward. And then you're going to come back and see us once you've got all these conditions met, not a building permit, just got it worked out with the neighbors that this is going to happen and this is going to happen and here's the easement between you and the mini golf course and this is your road forward. And I'd love to know that you've talked to fire and got this whole thing worked out. And then you come back and see us and you go, we're ready, we're about to start spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on architectural plans, engineering, consulting, everything, and would like to request the demolition permit. Would that,
We're 100% on board with that.
Okay.
And that, in fact, that's the way that we would prefer it.
okay, okay, that seems,
Yeah.
now, everybody forget we just said that, because I do not want that condition on me next week. Man, that is, oh, gosh, I'm glad it works for you.
And I think Committee Member Thompson asked earlier, and I didn't answer, it is typical that people come to us with projects at this level that there's already an architect, there's already an engineer. And I understand that's an expense and a cost and a burden, but yes, I would say that's probably the typical situation, is that they're coming in at this point with those trades already involved.
Okay, well, the fascinating things about this
Sorry.
is that I'm going to turn it over to Commissioner Egan.
Yes. To your comment about the building separation, I'm not sure who you spoke with, but I would make sure you consult with your structural engineer because it's a seismic
In the city?
pounding. Yeah. Well, your whoever you're signing, sealing,
Okay.
structural engineer of
Yeah.
record will be, because it ultimately comes down to their purview of code and scope, that it's a requirement that needs to be met or satisfied. So just whoever you talk to specifically about it. I know you mentioned a name, but I would just make sure your
The sign,
EOR
yeah.
for the sign and seal engineer is on board.
Okay.
Because it really is a structural requirement that has
Yes.
to be met.
We will
Or at
do
least
that.
satisfied and addressed in some way. So that's all I wanted to say, that because I heard it, I didn't want to make sure.
So-
We'll do that.
Okay.
So do we have the ability, if we wanted to approve, give them approval to move forward working on this building, do we have the ability to produce the long list of things that have to be done before a final approval could be? I mean, there's several, is there not, Michael? A long list, and maybe even a couple of more that we've brought up. But we would have to include all of that, would we not, in our approval?
You're wanting the list of conditions that we're
Yes,
wanting
yes.
satisfied by the planning and by.
The ones that are already existing, and then any that we have raised today.
So I think our purview is just design guidelines, is that not correct?
Yeah, so anything that's related to concerns about building code, that is going to be addressed as part of getting a building permit. And if it triggers something that needs to come back to you all for a revision to the design, then that'll be handled. I don't think that really needs to be a condition, because that's just how it works. I do think that you might want a condition particular to the design of the east facade, that, you know, I mean, again, that it's being approved as presented, and that if further revisions to that are necessary due to the abutting property or other complications, that will need to come back before this body to be reviewed. And then, yeah, any other changes to the design that you want the applicant to incorporate, that either can be submitted to staff as a revision, or if it's a more complicated change, would potentially come back to the committee. And then anything that needs to go to another body.
I might not be remembering this correctly, but it seems to me that typically if Michael says there's a long list or a short list of conditions or concerns, or typically that is included in our thinking as to whether we move forward with a recommendation or not. So that's why I raised the question, can we just address the design, say on the east side of the building, and that be our recommendation, and just know that the city is going to handle the long list that's on our sheet of paper today? I'm not familiar with that happening, I don't think.
I think that the staff's recommendations pertain to design guidelines. I don't think that anything in his recommendations is not sort of pertaining to design guidelines. So I think we can entertain those recommendations or not, but I don't think we just have to sort of address the east facade. I mean, I think we can choose which of those recommendations we would include in
Right.
approval.
So you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, you have 5 issues addressed as part of a staff recommendation. Four of those are design-related, and the 5th is to coordinate with Public Works and the Utilities Department to determine feasibility, applicable standards, and required approval process for the proposed structural entrance canopy over Wanda Jackson Way. You could probably add something to that about feasibility of windows and air conditioning units on the east facade, just to kind of capture that we know this may be something that requires additional review, permissions, et cetera. And then the other ones are all design-related. I think some of those you all agreed with, some of them you may strike or revise as you see necessary. And again, like I noted, I think the one thing that came up that isn't captured in any way here was the ADA access, if you wanted a condition particular to that.
Okay,
I have a checklist actually of 9 items that are all addressed, raised in this staff report, so that if the committee is, typically, this is very unusual, that the committee would try to either quote-unquote design the project at the dais or come up with conditions of approval at the dais. We did not write this report set up for an approval.
Yeah.
Therefore, we did not give you any of the conditions of approval that we would think would be appropriate to this approval, and we would have to craft them one by one at the meeting if that's what you want to do. And we can take a straw poll on all 9 items and make sure that everybody's on board with the way that the applicant has addressed them, particularly the architectural items, the building materials, the windows, the parapet provisions of profile. If the committee is inclined to entertain an approval today, we feel it'd be appropriate and important to address a number of the unresolved issues that we have before us today with a condition of approval for each and every one.
I don't know that we have really discussed, there's been so many things to discuss, the issue of shiny versus matte, and I just got to get this out. If we make a new thing look new, the old things look older. And I'm in favor of making new things that look new. And it's called the Gem Hotel. Even the logo looks like a gem, sparkly, shiny. One of my favorite buildings in our city is a class in 16. You know, it's a controversial building. Not everyone loves it. And I think that's important, that we build buildings that not everyone loves, that you have some fools like me that go, God, I love that silly thing. And other people are like, oh, but it becomes remarkable. People make remarks about it. And that is really important. Seth Godin wrote a whole book on that called Purple Cow. So I'm in favor of the shiny. I really think the shiny is important to this project. And I'd love to strike that one off because the list is long.
Two floors or one?
Huh?
Two
Two or
floors
one
or one?
You can make the whole building shiny as far as I'm
Oh,
concerned.
my gosh.
You're hired.
Yeah.
If possible, I'd like to step in here. I kind of started off the meeting with a strong, bend towards continuance. I'm still at that place. I think we could go through each one of these building items and help sort of make this building better and give our thoughts and opinions, but at the end of the meeting, to me, it's still an incomplete application. Items like the dumpster and site furnishings, and lighting, there's still some things that are missing from this application. And so, to me, you've kind of changed my mind on a little bit on just the approach. And I came in pretty hot today thinking, we're sitting here, it takes an hour to get through this. At our billable rates, basically you get $1,000 of free consultation on your project. I'm not saying that's what you're doing, but I'm saying when we approach projects this way, where to me it's actually remarkable that you're this far along and you still haven't hired your architects or engineers. And as Sandino said, I'm not a developer, and I know that you've kind of got to get something out there to get the ball rolling. But by the time it reaches us, we're a review committee. We're not a coaching committee. And so I'm not trying to come down hard, but I'm just asking that I feel like our time is very valuable, and I would like to and at this point, my recommendation is for continuance, give you time to get to the city, go to the Kingman folks and get a site plan worked out for the trash can. If they're in favor of that, have them come in here and say, we're in favor of that.
We've been through that already. I mean, we presented to the staff, your staff. We
We
presented.
do not have evidence of that in our review package.
We handed a whole review package to your staff, to Michael, and we went over that, 2 different meetings, and we showed a new location for a new enclosure of trash.
We have plans, but we don't have any agreement.
Right, so
I don't think we
need
can.
to know those things.
What I'm
as we
saying
move
is that
forward.
you're saying that your time is valuable, and we appreciate it.
Yeah.
But, I mean, if we do this continuance again, I don't know that we're gonna come to you with anything different than what we have, because we're stuck. We're at a certain point where we can't move forward because you're not allowing us to move forward.
Yeah. So I'd like to having been at both of the meetings. So I think this is constructive, even though it may, I mean, even if it takes time. There are a lot of great takeaways for me as somebody who's really, really interested in like this urban design review process for Bricktown. Like, this has been a great meeting. This is a very interesting and, to me, super intriguing project that I would like to see happen well and be madly successful. I tend to agree with the chair generally in my takeaway. And what I would say is, like, I would draw a little contention with the notion that you all are stuck. You may have gone as far as you're comfortable with going, which is completely within your purview. What I will say, though, is that the idea of getting an agreement from the owners of the adjacent buildings on a usage is to me like is a part of the step to making the deal, because I can't build a hotel without the trash service and understanding the scale of that. So my professional opinion is that an approval here doesn't then make the owner receptive. In fact, a part of the thing is if there's an opportunity, especially a financial opportunity with that owner to share those uses, then they would be inclined to agree so that this thing gets approved, so that that's put in place. And so I do think those elements to me are also, I would echo the comment that there is some level of incompleteness here. I absolutely wanted to understand process, and it feels like there is a pathway where there could be some comfort or some consensus built on an approval. But I mean, just from the sake of time and the discussion, I agree with the chair.
Do we have any public members that wish to speak on the item? Mr. DeWitt? Yes, sir.
Hello, I'm Daniel Douthit. I'm a licensed architect with Rolock Studio. Just for total transparency, Brent Wall I've worked with in the past, and Kasha I went to school with. What Mr. Rodriguez is doing right now is violating the practice laws.
Daniel?
Yes.
Would you mind stating your address for the record?
2621 Northwest 15th.
Okay, and please sign the thing.
Okay, thank you. You have to bear with me.
No, you're fine, thank you.
15th. What Mr. Rodriguez is currently doing is violating the practice laws in this state. You are supposed to hire an architect from preliminary design all the way to sealed signed construction drawings. This building, as proposed right now, cannot be built without an easement. Even a 10-foot easement, we may see less fenestration. I think there are a lot of questions that need to be answered before this board approves this. Sorry, my voice is very sore. I also question what the fire department will think of the porte-cochere on the alley and if they will have proper clearance for their ladders, since 20 feet clear is what's required. There are a whole host of issues that a licensed architect should be answering before this board approves this project. Thank you.
I will say that, you know, in researching this project, I had that same question. The proposal that was brought forth October 11th was actually on a different title block. This one comes back with D5 architecture, which is a licensed and has a certificate of authority at the state. So there was some question there. So at this point, I can't comment to whether or not Daniel's comments are correct or not. But there has been kind of a switch of horses that I can tell in terms of who's kind of in control of the project. Anybody else wish to speak? Yes, sir.
My name is Josh Blevins, 3333 Briarwood, Newcastle. I'm the COO of Gem Industries Group. We're the developers on this. Just to clarify some stuff, we have hired an architectural group. We have hired an engineering group. He is actually one of the directors of our development company. He does have a background in architectural. So we have gone through those processes. We are working towards getting a full construction set of plans. I have no idea who that guy was or what he was here in regards to as far as law and what we're doing illegal, but
Well,
I just wanted to clarify that.
yeah, so he is a licensed architect. Generally, whenever buildings are developed to this level, there is a licensed architect attached to it.
Understand.
So, architects, they're in competition, they're gonna go out and see what's happening. If you do a quick search on the Board of Architects for the state, Origin 3, which was the company that, the title block on the actual
Yeah, correct.
documents, that company does not have a certificate of authority with the state
Yeah.
or an architect attached to it.
Yeah, correct.
So that raises some red flags.
Even though it states that it's not used for, I got it.
It does,
Yeah.
because you're bringing to us
I got you.
an architectural building within that should be under the control of a licensed
Understand.
architect.
Yeah, so Andrew Siemens with D5 is the architect that we hired. So, thank you for your time.
And it's it's a really interesting question because I've had that question before. To me, I don't think a project should be submitted for review to the city unless it is clearly under the control of a licensed professional. But there have been times when projects have slipped through that don't. But I know that in the development world, things have to happen before they can happen, and so it's a little bit of a gray area. And I don't see anything. I mean, it's not for us to litigate whether or not that's true or not. Whether or
I
not
don't think
this
there's
is,
anything
yeah.
in the city code that requires architectural plans at this stage, but certainly in order to get a building permit, or, you would.
So we're sort of stuck here as to whether or not we want to continue this to next month, give you guys time to work out a whole bunch of this over the next month with Chris and easement and everything else, trash. I think the canopy, the buildings, if you end up taking the canopy away because you can't get the revocable permit, the building's not severely diminished. I think you may have gotten enough feedback today to make it just as easy to take a continuance, go do a bunch of work, get the easements in place, figure out what you're doing with the trash relative to Kingman, and get all of that secured, come back and see us and go, all right, now I want certificate of approval. It's the same difference, really, if we say we're going to give you approval condition on all these things. I mean, surely you're going to go get those easements before you start spending thousands of dollars doing architectural plans, because they're really going to have a big impact on your architectural plans. So I don't know, if I'm standing in your shoes, which I would rather have, a continuance to go do a month's worth of work and then come back and report in, or approval from us with a whole list of conditions. So,
Well, I guess on our end, as developers, the time frame, if we wait for a continuance, it's another month, 2 months, I think. So in that time frame, hiring all the consultants, actually spending the money in the consultants, and engaging the different departments, in the city to actually start applying for all those approvals, going through the process. If we wait and do the option that you're saying, we have to wait 2 months, really, month and a half, 2 months.
Okay.
And then getting the ball rolling, whether you agree or not, and then hire the people, and then go through the.
Yeah.
So it would help us tremendously speed up the process if we get everybody involved already and start engaging all those different departments. So.
At this time, I would like to ask for a motion to continue the item so that some of these items, so they could get worked out and come back to us, as you said, with a much more robust and worked out application.
I mean, we have a pretty good track record of encouraging the discussion. I'm happy to move for a continuance, in part because of the things we discussed, and then in part because of the feedback from staff. Because I think this actually puts, for this project, it puts things in, I mean, it puts things in sort of the right place to make the most informed, best decision as far as how people are going to vote on the issue in January, in my mind. Because I think staff can be prepared to sort of hone in on an approval option, given the discussion we've had today, versus a continuance option, versus a declination. And so that's just as important to me probably as also giving time. But I will say from experience in the space, at least here in Oklahoma City, I don't see this as keeping the due diligence on the project and the deal from being able to move forward. I mean, you need a certificate of occupancy or approval, sorry, from this body for sure. But you don't need a certificate of approval to make the deal. To make the deal with adjacent landowners, to determine or be more determinate on sort of the things that I think were mentioned that might not be as clear or complete. Like those things are not. I wouldn't want to put this project or put another developer in a position to be sort of dead in the water, but I don't believe that's the case. Anyway, so I'm happy to make that motion if there are not other motions that are of interest.
Mr. Vice Chair?
I would love to be able, and this is so complicated, I mean, we were trying to think how to do it. I'd love to be able to make the motion to approve it with a bunch of conditions. And that is really going to be hard to do and tedious. I agree with both approaches because I do think you can go get a lot done. It's hard to get anything done this time of year, but I think you can get a lot of stuff done, come back, just like Sandino said, staff has put together a report recommending approval. If all these conditions are met, you're going to come back and go, hey, I met all these conditions. Boom, we're out of here, and you're on your way. I think it's 6 of one, half a dozen the other, but I'm a real estate developer. Time kills deals. So I want to get you what you feel like you need, but I also think that you're going to get what you need either way.
Sure.
So
If there is going to be a motion to continue, staff would appreciate, and I'm sure certainly the applicant would appreciate, some feedback, direction, consensus on some of the architectural issues so that he knows whether or not he has more work to do there or not. And that is, so we have the windows, I think most importantly at the south elevation facing 1 Jackson Way. We have whether or not the job he's done with the parapet wall profile on the north end of the building is acceptable to the committee or not. We have the use of the stainless steel tiles on whether it should be the 7th and 8th floor or just the 8th floor, and whether it should be shiny or matte. And we also have the roof design, which we've stressed, I think, in both of our reports, is not consistent with the guidelines of the Bricktown Core Development District. And if we are going to need to know whether or not the committee is fine with the design as it's shown, or whether he needs to do more work to make it flat like the code says it should be. Basically, having that kind of feedback will alleviate some work on the applicant's part, and the report will be a lot shorter next time.
And that's kind of why I'd like to move to approve with conditions. I like the picture we're seeing that isn't, I mean, it looks like a new building. It's got a lot of shiny stuff on it. You know, I'd like it to be shiny, and I'd like to see all the bands on there, including the 7th, 8th, and the roof cantilevered way out there. I mean, I think all those things add energy and vibrance to the city as you slowly accrue a skyline over decades. And, I don't think everything should match. I really don't.
So I think an approval with conditions is an option. I also think you can continue it with additional direction to the applicant specific to the design, as Michael noted, any other items that have come up today that you would want to see a little more set in stone when it comes back before you. And I tend to agree. I think it's a little bit 6 of one, half dozen of the other, but a continuance gives us a little more flexibility in not having to nail down every one of those conditions at this moment.
So I think this is more a question for the chair, but I'm not sure how I'm not sure how it would be the best to discuss or conclude on what the committee's sort of thoughts are, because I probably have a little different take than Richard, and I'm sure, everybody sort of is entitled to theirs, right? So I'm happy to make the motion to continue, and I'm happy to make it with conditions, but it would be from my perspective. So I'm not sure the best way to resolve that if the goal is to give sort of staff and the applicant sort of that kind of feedback. But however we move the thing forward, I'm on the record for trying to figure out how we can move a process forward to some action, though. Yep.
So I think let's give you some movable action. I think I'm on board that we need to, if you're okay with it, I know you're putting faith in us, we're putting faith in you. It sounds like a recommendation of continuance is really the best action, and then you can try and incorporate, and you'll have to go on some faith if you want to bring in some of your consultants to really address some of these other issues that were really outside of our purview, but kind of, we're experienced enough to know these are going to be hurdles you're going to have to overcome one way or another.
Right.
And if they do affect the design enough, you're going to have to come back because it'll change it by what we've approved. So let's go line by line. And I would agree too that, I think the trash disposal,
This would just be the second.
you're going to have to get something in writing and an actual agreement for us to agree to move forward, because that's just an item. It won't be serviceable and usable for your staff and the people in there. So I think A is going to have to be addressed in the staff report of 2, where you need plans detailing trash disposal and location and get an agreement with the building going. I'll keep rattling them off, and if anyone disagrees, give me a thumbs up or thumbs down.
Kasha, do you want to make a motion and
Well, I kind of want to have us discuss these real quick to make sure we're all in agreement, and then I'll make a motion.
Okay, all right.
Okay, so I'm with Richard. There's no way we're going to match this to the existing context exactly of what an old building is old and a new is new. We've got to marry the two, and it's really hard to successfully match old brick buildings to look like old brick buildings. So I'm of the opinion for item B, redesign of the north facade and the south facade. To me, you've met my requests from the last meeting. I appreciated that, to minimize the louvers, and you've increased some of the window size and things. So in my opinion, item B is not a recommendation that I think we should make, and we should leave it as is for the north and south facades architectural features. Okay. The roof overhangs, I think they kind of add some, I don't know if it's an easement issue, even though we're that high in the sky for the north and the south side. I would also agree that those exaggerated overhangs, to just leave them as they are. And so that's not a recommendation that I would make in my motion that I'm about to make, hopefully in the next 5 minutes.
I think the roof overhangs are a challenge for me, I firmly agree on newness versus oldness, and not trying to design the buildings, but I also think we have guidelines that talk about. We should change the guidelines, right? If we want people to do whimsical if we want really whimsical things in the heart of Bricktown, we should change the guidelines. That's my opinion on that. Like the other pieces, like trying to make new match old, I 100% agree with. But yeah, that one is a little different for me than the others.
Dasha, were you through?
Nope.
Is there any more discussion on the overhangs?
Well, we need to discuss the overhang some more, I think, but Avis, no, the list continued on with, and I think I'm hearing from the committee, is my mic on? It feels like it's not on. Okay, it is on. Alter the elevations as necessary for stainless steel tile. I'm also in agreement there to let them stay shiny and leave them where they are for the repetition. So that's also, those are probably the two that we need to discuss. And the one that I would think would be an easy, yes, you need to address would be coordinate with Public Works for the southern canopy, for entrance canopy at Wanda Way. I think we need to see movement on that. So that might be the easy one, and then we kind of need to talk about what direction we will approve when we get to our next meeting upon the continuance for roof overhangs and stainless steel tile and/or amount of stainless steel tile, horizontal bands.
Then do we need to add easement?
We need to add an item related to easement for the east elevation for all the windows, right? Because we know that that's a big problem. But I think that's already an agreement that that easement would need to be approved.
Do you want something regarding the ADA access?
Oh, woof, and the ADA access. Are we removing from our guidelines using lifts in Bricktown because of the maintenance issues with them? Or no, that's just to address, if there's a way we can address ADA access without a lift?
There'll be so many instances, especially in this complex one, where you're trying to maintain a usable height in that story above, or at the ground level, which is one of my favorite things about this, is that it's got a really great experience at the canal level. And then they're also trying to marry up and meet the Kingman building at their top floor. I think there will be times in the future where a lift is your only option, but I also think you're totally going to be able to get your ADA access in the process of getting the easement. I have dealt with easements that are conditional, right? So, if you're negotiating with Chris and you say, I need this easement, however wide it has to be, and the easement only becomes a permanent easement upon the issuance of a building permit, then that there are ways you can craft an easement so that you don't have a permanent, or you don't have an easement on his property if this doesn't ever happen. So just something to think about.
Yeah. I mean, the whole reason we didn't do a ramp is because it's the alleyway and there's no room.
Yeah, of course, there's no room to do the ramp, but I think you can do the ramp if you
it's on the easement.
if you build a sidewalk in that easement, so.
And I would say on the material, the stainless steel material, I like the stainless steel material, and after Richard's comments on it being shiny, but I also like the creativity that we can use with brick, it being Bricktown. So if we eliminate the row on the, I'm not sure what floor is, on the second one from the bottom, the top one after that one. If we eliminate that, and it's just finding a more creative way to marry those two bricks instead of just another. And I like the way it connects from the top down to the bottom and adds the shiny and the different material. But like just it being Bricktown, just maybe find a more creative way for the transition there, I think.
Up at the top, it's not, the second highest band is not brick abutting brick separated by the metal band. It's that metallic
Right. No, I'm talking about the one.
So this is that metal?
It's all metal. It's two floors of the metal.
Yeah, that's that metal.
Right, on the second. Oh, so that's not brick?
Those are both metal panels.
Oh,
Yeah.
that is metal?
Yeah, it's the dark.
The copper colored.
Oh, I see, okay.
It's got a cool iridescent quality, so I'll Vanna White this thing for you
Oh,
guys.
I see,
Isn't that
I
cool?
see. Okay, it looked like brick. Oh, okay. Well, then I'm definitely for removing more, honestly. Just because this is Bricktown, and I just want to keep more of that Bricktown feel. And it feels at that point now like half of the building is metal and half of it is brick.
Well,
Right. But just by looking at it. we already have the canopy. I like the canopy. I like it angled. I know we want it flat because of the regulations, but I like the angle of it. It makes sense just from a construction. Like you want a way for water to come off of the roof.
How does that work as far as, so we're proposing that we have these two levels, that middle panel, but then there's some committee members that are okay with that, but others that are not.
We've got to duke it out to give you
Oh,
direction.
okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I thought it was brick. I just thought it was a different material or different color brick. And with it now, realizing that it's more shiny, even though I like the shiny, I liked the fact that it was brick and we were just emphasizing some of the shininess to tie it all in. But now that whole top floor is shiny, plus there's a lot. I just want more traditional brick to be married with the new, the cantilevered roof, the metal that's coming from the top to the bottom. So that's my thought on that.
I did want to just chime in. I mean, we have to go back to the guidelines. And so the staff report does say that they feel like the use of this is beyond what would be an accent, okay? So, and this is where it's hard because we can give opinion, but we can't design the building, but we can only go back to the regulations and try to understand where staff is coming from.
So can you, when you said they commented on it being beyond an accent, can you further explain what we mean by that? Sorry.
So staff believes that the use of this material on 2 entire floors of the building goes beyond limiting the use to highlight or accent certain defined architectural features or facade elements. So the recommendation is really to pinch that down to the 8th floor and not the 7th floor.
And what the guidelines say is that the use, creative use of other materials such as glass, smooth concrete, and architectural metals is encouraged, provided that these materials are used in a limited quantity and sensitively integrated with the established material palette of red brick and cast stone. The use of such materials should be limited and only used as a means to highlight or accent certain defined architectural features or facade elements of the structure.
Yeah. And so my comments on the two items we're kind of debating, the roof and this, would really be consistent with that. Like I think I kind of tend to agree that like getting some modern on a modern building, absolutely on board with it. I just want to acknowledge like if we don't care about the historic preservation side, which is not to me still just the buildings, but it's like we have design guidelines, right? We should just change the guidelines and say if it's an old building, like you got to do these things. If it's a new building, like all bets are off. But that's not the standards we have now. So I'm on board with like the idea of the 8th floor being this accent. I don't mind you guys having a little beacon and like keeping things a little whatever. I just don't want to skew the other direction because it's a new building. So
I'm all in favor of changing the guidelines. Just got to get that on record. So
Can we meet then?
yeah, if we just have this only on that top floor, it almost looks like an add-on stuck on top of a building that's trying to look old. And I really like the idea of that coming down and like marrying on top of the full width and length of the building. It just, there's something about it if you sort of block it out and imagine, it almost looks like the little house sitting up there by itself as opposed to, and I get it, it's a lot. It's more than the guidelines are calling for, but I think what we're seeing here is pretty handsome.
On our end it's the signature for the boutique hotel. It's exactly what you said. You hit it on the nail. It gives the hotel the character and the personality that it is the hotel that we want it to be. We feel that having 6 levels of brick, traditional brick, that you see in all the buildings adjacent and across the canal, it does preserve the traditional brick that you have in Bricktown. So by adding 1.5 floors on top of that, that is the more contemporary that we're marrying with the traditional. This is done in very historic places, even in Italy, and you got buildings that are from the 1400s, Germany, New York. So we feel that we're not really going overboard here.
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess in the effort of moving the conversation forward, I will say that, like, I think that part is really open to interpretation. I mean, for me, as far as like, if we were going to sort of vote or sort of take or try and give some direction on what we would approve, I default to the guidelines. I don't disagree with anything that's being said. And honestly, if I'm this is not a proverbial hill for me to die on. I could be fine with the 7th floor. It's just easy to say, yeah, I'll go with staff recommendations to do the 8th. So.
I will say this, and Ophelia, when you mentioned it, I was reading those top 2 floors as just a repeat of the dark brick. I didn't interpret it from here as this material. So, but now that you say that, I'm like, oh, that's extra cool. But coming back to the canopy cantilevered out over Wanda Jackson, that you will be required to get an easement for that, because it goes all the way to the sky, however high that is. And your sign you're going to require a revocable permit for your cantilevered sign, and I love your sign. The higher up you get, the more likely, Public Works and Fire are going to be able to, stand down and go, yeah, whatever you can.
And we actually have visited on-site with those departments.
Yeah.
So they've been there on-site.
I think if you, again, block out and remove that cantilever from the top, it does take away from the building. And I like that wing. We're an aviation city, it's got some fun to it. It's a big, shiny, like an airplane, and the diamond, or it's more like it's a jewel of a ring, or it's a piece of jewelry. You're building a giant piece of jewelry.
Is this the bottom floor? Okay, so it's going to be,
That's the bottom, and that's
right, but this is the bottom, and then they're
that's at the very
about the same color, it's just that it's shiny.
Ophelia, if you go to, if you open up the attachment, or the applications and attachment, or if we can put them up on here, I don't know what page it is, but the elevation and materials, it kind of helps you summarize what's going where, to identify 7 and above, and then the accents below. And so I guess that the lower band that will stay stainless steel, it is interrupted by the louvers. Is that correct? Yeah, on that facade.
And you can probably zoom in one of those other elevations. That's the coping that does a 6. And so we use that coping. Right now it does a 6-ack in the existing building. And so so what happened is we basically took that 6-ack from the original north elevation, and we made a play out of those windows. Whenever it intersects those windows, it kind of zigzags along those windows as well. But we're kind of taking that architectural feature and bringing it across all the 3 elevations. And so you have your brick coping, and then you have your metal, your more chrome, shiny metal above that.
So to that, I honestly think the guidelines are appropriate because it leaves for discussion and interpretation of developers or people coming in with a project where, yes, we're negotiating over what accent and highlight architecture is, but that brings us back to architectural theory of what we need to do there. So I know these guidelines, we think that they're limiting in some ways, but they're really open-ended in others, and I think that's what we want, to invite people's interpretations. So really, it's for us to discuss, if we are, well, how do we move further on these two items with an overhang and a facade of what we move forward with? Because I think we're in agreement on the other things, so we need that final direction, so hopefully we can wrap up and let everybody get some work going.
But I'd say as a stick in the mud, I'm a lot, at least even from the standpoint of giving you guys feedback, it feels like you got the gist of the accent versus, architectural feature and the guidelines. I don't know if it's worthwhile to talk more about the roof line, because and I would just say, being transparent is like, I can be swayed to your point about the guidelines. So I just don't think that's the big, I don't think it's there you can sort of count, right, the votes. I don't think that's one to keep having conversations about. The roof line, I don't think I can be swayed on. I have a difference of opinion with folks here, but that's one where, I think something different, and we talked about this last time you guys proposed it, is consistent. I'm kind of partial to roofs in Bricktown, because I do think when you zoom back, like a while back, we talked about water towers and some of these other things. I think those features are important, and they get overlooked. So that's one that, just as far as gauging whatever takeaways you want, I'm probably more of a stick in the mud on that one than I am on the argument about 7th and 8th floor versus 8th floor. So.
Okay, so is there a way, what were you saying, Avis?
He's saying no on that one.
Yeah, I hear you. So is there a way that we can ask for an alternate that would not, for that roof overhang, because I'm maybe trying to help you kill two birds with one stone, and that's not where I should be, but that would avoid you requiring an easement. And because I don't know if we have direction, because I'm kind of leaning towards I like it, because I'm not an architect, I'm not a designer, I don't know what you do to finish it off otherwise at the top from what they've currently got designed. But how can we give direction then, or what do we leave open-ended to let them solve the problem? Are we wanting to see, because I'm hoping you're in agreement that we're moving for the continuance, otherwise we could have ended our meeting 30 minutes ago. But trying to give you direction. So where are we with the facade for shiny versus shiny, and how much it is? You said you're willing to be swayed. Here I am, like counting.
Yeah.
I'm ready to go Yahtzee.
Yay shiny, yay top 2 floors for shiny.
I feel you were or Brent, I'm not sure where you stood on it. And maybe I'm putting too much pressure on our committee, but I do want to make sure we have productive feedback so that you can walk away with some.
Are you guys recommending that we don't do the overhang or the roof, or no?
Well, it looks like we're not into agreement. It would need a recommendation from this body to approve that, is what I believe, because it would be outside the guidelines. And can you, Michael, lead me to where we are that,
As far as the roof overhangs are concerned, Parks has cleared it.
okay,
Parks has no concerns on the north side.
but we don't know about the south side.
South side, it's my opinion that Public Works would just ask for a revocable permit.
Right.
Yeah.
So there's no recommendation necessary from the committee on that. Don't.
Okay.
Gosh, what I think I heard you say is it would be nice to see a version with and without when you come back. Seems like it's not that big a deal to pull that.
Well, I guess it's a question of how much do we pull it back, because
Here's the thing.
That roof is our signature.
Yeah, okay. And again, it feels like it. If you can't get the revocable permit, because you have to have a Cox Communications, AT&T, like every utility company has to sign off on it, plus Public Works and Fire and so on, trash. So, usually revocable permits make sense when it's a removable item, like a sign, like a canopy. The roof is clearly not a removable item. You can't go up and just take it out of the way while they're doing, some kind of whatever they would ever, not, it's a low risk thing given how high it is, but it might be really useful if you pulled it back, in all the way back to the point where you didn't have to have a revocable permit. And to answer that, it would be all the way back.
It would
and
be without
I
a-
think the building
Yeah.
looks, just blocking that out, I think it looks less handsome without it. So-
It'll kill the project. In our view, it's the top floors and the roof overhang, it's what makes the building our building.
Okay,
And so it would be very tough to come back from that.
okay.
Public Works, Parks and
You have to die-
Recreation.
Well, no, but so that's fair. This doesn't need to be unanimous. And so also, I think just to keep clear on, I think where we are to move the thing forward was to get feedback for the applicant and for staff heading into January if we were going to continue, right?
So there-
So we've done that.
Yeah,
Yeah. It feels like.
okay.
So have we done all we need to do?
So I think that we've gone through the items that were itemized by staff in the staff report to be addressed. I think the applicant's been given good substantive input on design and other issues as far as permitting and revocables and that sort of thing. So I think, the remaining thing would be, are we continuing to a January 7th or a January 10th meeting or a February 7th? January 10th is a tight turnaround to get meaningful answers to a lot of these questions.
Because I think, you could say you want it January 10th, but that means you'd have to have your application in and adjustments made within,
Next Tuesday.
yeah.
That's too
So
quick.
that's just too tight, because it all has to be out for public review. Huh? Oh,
It seems
Yeah.
like we haven't asked actually for a lot of changes. I defer that to the parties that be. I think
True.
sooner than later. If there's a reason to wait, it should be because you guys think February gives you more time. I've actually heard them say that they feel more stuck. So in my mind, it's like a couple of weeks to talk with the Chris's of the world, the Kingman Building owners of the world, and others about actual agreements. If that's going to influence what you're proposing from a design standpoint, right?
I think you're
and if
right.
it's not, then it's like, okay, well then we're actually, nope, we're just gonna delete all these windows because we won't have an agreement in place, right? Or we're gonna leave them in and we're just gonna sort of roll the dice with what that looks like. I think that anyway, I don't know that you guys, in my mind, the continuance is on you all's timeline.
Well, let me ask you, like you were saying just now, to us, what we're hearing from you is the biggest item is really the east elevation and the easement. If it's, correct? So if we get an agreement with Chris and we resolve that in order to submit by, what is the next Tuesday, Michael? Then that's doable for us. But if it's more of other stuff,
Yeah. Well, and to be clear, I don't know that you have to have that. I'm not saying you got to have that meeting and that agreement in place for Michael. I don't think. I think you'd have to have it by the time we meet.
Yeah.
In my opinion, sorry, not trying to. And so the goal would be to try and get to something that's easy to approve and that gives you guys time to sort of to have what I do want to say to speak to the chairman's statement, which I probably actually more agree with, is this design as presented seems somewhat incomplete. I think you could list out some things. If that's not going to change, it seems like between now and then there would be something to add. So I don't necessarily know that there's more that has to be submitted by Tuesday. But I think when we meet in January, like you've heard all of the concerns, being prepared to sort of speak to those concerns in order to make this sort of a more complete or whatever we want to call it proposal to approve. But it also gives, I believe, the staff time to consider more intently what from their standpoint, what approval would or could look like, because they hadn't done that.
I would also add that if we know by the time we are publishing for the January meeting that you do need some sort of approval from council or something from Board of Adjustment or from Traffic Commission, then we could incorporate those recommendations into that meeting and kill another bird with the same stone, and then you wouldn't have to come back again for those items.
So, I mean, if, on our end, if we get all those things lined up and provide you with all those things from now until the January meeting, it's all doable. But if we have to get all those items ready to submit by Tuesday, we don't have to do that, Michael?
You have to submit by Tuesday,
Then,
but you
what
have
is-
until the meeting date to, if you have agreements you need to have in place,
agreements?
like Committee Member Thompson said, we can wait to the meeting date to have those. It'd be better if we had them earlier, like
So-
a week ahead of time, but
Okay.
we need to know what your resubmittal for the January meeting is going to look like by Tuesday. So you can come back to us on Tuesday and say, we're going to get an agreement with Kingman for the trash. We're going to have an agreement with Chris Johnson for your easement on the east side. You can tell us what you're planning on doing.
So then drawings would be for Tuesday, but agreements we can have up to.
The actual execution of the documents that we need to see can wait till the actual meeting date.
Can I volunteer and say, yes, we'll aim for the January one? And if we can't, for some reason, submit by
So
Tuesday?
I move to continue this item until the January 10th meeting.
Okay.
Add that as our condition, part of the, because I know their recommendation was February 14th, but yes, and if it comes down to you're saying on day of execution for Tuesday, we know your application won't be ready. We've had that happen before. We know it's not intentional.
This
We
is
don't-
going to be a really easy
Yeah.
item to turn over, because I'm going to take this 25-page report, I'm going to make it 12,
Yeah,
or maybe 8.
right, right, right.
And we will add on, instead of a bunch of issues to address in the continuance, we'll write out for you what we think has not been covered with conditions of approval that have been thought out.
So I can get a writing list, a list of the items that I need,
Yes,
that we need to look in?
yes.
Okay.
Okay.
I
So-
want to ask one question before we go to an emotion of the applicant that I've never asked before, and I don't know why I haven't asked it before. Is there a reason, what is the plate height of the basement level, and why can't you make the south end of the building flush with Wanda Jackson Way?
My understanding from Johnson and Associates, who did the civil survey, is that the set foundation slab as it is right now, it's not deep enough to accommodate a full floor height.
Can you not make it deeper?
We're trying to save money.
You've got to come out at the canal level though, right? Because he's
They
arriving.
can do the adjustment on that basement level, or on the second level.
Going
They
going
can make it
down?
lower on the south end and higher on the north.
I mean, the
They
only.
can accommodate the difference in grade on the interior rather than the exterior.
One of the things that we were not expecting budget-wise was that we were going to have to demo the whole structure. After the structural review that we got, it's not an issue. And
Oh.
so now,
So what you're saying, that there's actually a step up on the canal level floor to get into the canal level as well?
it's 2 steps height.
That seems like an ADA problem also. And
We have a lift.
I get that, but I do think Michael raised a really good point. Lowering your
Yeah.
canal level seems like a really good idea.
Yeah. We're hoping to save a little money by not messing with the foundation that is there right now.
Okay.
But you know.
It's a big building you're putting back on an existing foundation.
I do have a question about that. Will that foundation, is it appropriate for what's fixing to be put on it?
According to this structural assessment and survey, that yes, it's in good condition. The only thing is we're going to have to come in, and structural is going to have to design footings and perimeter, you know, footing and all that, and you know, we're going to erect the steel from there. But yeah, I mean, we're trying to save as much existing foundation as possible. It's still up in the air. It's not 100% sure, but it's one of those things that we haven't hired the consultants yet to kind of go and do what they need to do, the full investigation and what would need, you know, the pros and the cons of really spending the money and going from scratch, even with the foundation, this lab, so.
I think we had a motion, did we?
I would like to make a motion.
We just need
Oh, wait, do I not need to re-summarize everything that we just, is there anything that needed clarification on the motion?
I
Yeah.
think, I mean, I think the applicant
Okay,
has received all that information. I don't think you need to reiterate in the
I was getting nervous if I had to.
continuance. And Committee Member Thompson motion to continue to January 10th.
We need a second, please.
I would second that motion.
Thank you. All vote.
I'm gonna be an aye. I'm still, me and Prime are not friends today.
I don't know how I get back to my screen.
There you go. All right.
All right, the motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
On to item number 7, other business. We have none. Item number 8, communications, administrative approval report. The staff wish to have any comments on this item? No. Good. Okay. Any comments from committee members? Thank you so much. Good. All right, our next meeting date is set for January 10th, 2024. Sounds like we will be back. As noted, applications need to be submitted by 4 p.m. Tuesday, the something it's cut off. Can't remember. All right, item 9, adjourn the meeting. Thank you, everybody, at 11:18 p.m. a.m.